So episode 4 of the Fallout show is the most brutal and intense one yet, and dare I say, the best episode yet. Wow, I'm blown away they went this hard, this quickly. I'm absolutely impressed. It's Fallout to a T. I'm nerding out over the show, and I'm absolutely in love with it. So I went from skeptical in episode 1 to absolutely thinking this might just be one of the best shows of the year, one of the best video game adaptations of all time. Who knows, maybe in the next 4 episodes I'll completely drop the ball, but I am so impressed. So one of the things I love about this adaptation is the fact that it takes place in the same universe as the games. They're not retconning anything other than, maybe some lore details and all that. It really just feels at home. It feels like another Fallout game, except it's a TV show, but it takes full advantage of the medium that it's in. But you see so many of the same details, and we're going to get into a little bit of that as we go. But this episode, I think, did the right thing here and pruned it down to just 2 storylines. There's no Maximus. A storyline is with the Ghoul and Lucy. Lucy making her full conversion into a raider, basically somebody in the apocalypse. She is now a wanderer. She isn't the vault dweller anymore. By the end of the episode, you see her full transformation in terms of her costume, but she still gets to retain a little bit of her humanity at the end. And here you see the ghoul kind of get in touch with his humanity at the end. But we're learning about ghouls. If you've never seen any Fallout games before, you're learning how that works. And they present it in a really organic and interesting way. No exposition dumps here. It is just displayed organically. Got some really great, you could call it zombie action. Ghouls at the end, the feral ghouls going insane. Absolutely loved it. But the brutality of this episode is what you're going to remember the most. We got some great suspense value coming in here, and then we see a guy named Roger transforming into a feral ghoul. Our ghoul has to take these inhaler things to stay a ghoul and not turn feral, and we hint at it here, what's going on. Give a little bit of humanity to it, seeing this guy here. You feel bad for him. He seems to be a nicer guy, and I think that's important to show the first feral ghoul is somebody that you kind of are interested in seeing survive. You don't want to just have the first one be just there trying to kill you. So I think it was good writing here. And then our ghoul, Cooper, just kind of goes crazy on him. So it appears on the first viewing. But, there's a little bit more depth to what he's doing because, of course, we know the guy, by the end of the episode, we know that this guy was going feral. So you could call it somewhat of a humane thing to, stop him from doing the full transformation. The ghoul says he doesn't have any of the cartridges. He doesn't have any more of that. You would assume on first viewing that he's lying about it, but it seems by the end he actually didn't have any more, and he was telling the truth. So who would he have been if he actually had some extra? If he had as many of the cartridges as he does at the end of the episode, would he have actually given one to this guy here? That is, I think, one of the operating questions. He's a selfish guy, right? So he puts the guy out of his misery, and you could make an argument for that. And then he is cannibalizing him. Another thing from the games, by the way, there is actually like a perk you can get in the games where you end up eating some people, and it's definitely something that has happened elsewhere in the game as well. So it's a very brutal, pretty much the worst things you can imagine is what this guy is doing, this ghoul here. He has been fully transformed by the wasteland, from that good guy we saw before into a ruthless killer out for himself, cannibalizing people, putting somebody in the water as bait, torturing somebody. He is definitely like pretty much the worst thing you can imagine, but you can understand that he represents the wasteland itself because he's been alive for so long, and he forces her to partake in it. He wants her on his level. It's almost like he has to justify himself and how he's living now by trying to force her into that. So he didn't cannibalize her. He, I suppose, feels like he needs her for something, or it's just this twisted thing like he needs her on his level. There's some interesting psychological things going on we're going to break down, I think, a little bit more later. But the B plot of this episode is actually in the vault, and I'm very glad we're getting more time in the vault. I think it makes sense. There's an election coming up, and the casting of the show is so good because like everybody really looks their part. Here we have a scene where one of the council members is talking to Norm about what he said at the meeting, that he thinks that we should consider executing the prisoners. And I was kind of hoping in this scene that she was going to say, I actually agree with you, but we got to keep it on the down low to convince people. I think that would have been a little bit more interesting. She's just saying that his role is more important than he thinks it is. And I think that that's setting him up for the investigation he goes on, where he finds out what happened, how the raiders got in, what happened to Vault 32, and all that. He might actually have a pivotal role in the future. He never envisioned himself that way. He's just kind of a slacker, right? Or he was. So, this setting up a transition point, which I do appreciate. And then we got a kind of violent exchange here where we got irradiated water. Her forced to drink it, and it's going to make her sick probably. And I love the lasso. He lassos her, and then she bites his finger off, and he cuts her finger off. And he called that the most honest exchange yet, because that's all he sees as truth, is the very essence of surviving in the wasteland is violence. That is all the legitimacy he sees left in this world. So she kind of is his gateway back to a little bit of humanity. Even though it seems like, based on certain things he does throughout these first few episodes, that he still has some of that in him. He just needs encouragement to bring it out. I mean, it's 200 years of this ruthless lifestyle where he's had to do unspeakable things, and it's led him to this point. I love the writing in this show. I think it's really good. There's definitely stuff you could nitpick and whatnot, and I have, of course, but I think it's pretty solid. So we got Chet here, the cousin effer of Lucy, the lovers, ew, gross, but the woman who lost an eye and her husband is missing him, and she ends up banging him. I knew that right away. So part of me was thinking that she was going to try to convince him to get on her side and convince everybody to execute the prisoners. That's not what happened, of course. It's more interesting this way. It's funny. So it was a funny scene. And then we got the super duper mart, and I just got to nerd out for a second about all the little Easter eggs we see. We've seen Nuka-Cola, we've seen Sunset Sarsaparilla, we've heard earlier in this episode about what's it called, Bamco mac and cheese, super duper mart. They have Braxco, this detergent, like all these different little things. There's a Radaway packet hidden, and everything looks exactly right. They really did a lot of work to make everything accurate, and I gotta thank Todd Howard and the Bethesda team for making sure everything fits in exactly right. Just like nerding out over it, the sounds that the Pip-Boys make, the way the computers look, the sound effects when the computers are loading, everything is right, dude. The fact that they have lights on the Pip-Boys, like I'm so excited by all these little things. And there's actually a good story here too. It's not just like Easter eggs and then it's just okay. It is like the perfect fan love letter, I think, is what this show is, and I'm really happy with it right now. And I just love this character of the ghoul. He's the dark sheriff that he played in that movie that we see at the end. So oh man, I'm just so happy with it. Super Duper Mart is really, really messed up. And we got a helpful bot, it seems, who's going to heal her up and all that. But, of course, it's not that. We'll get back to that. And he's feeding the prisoners. I know where this is going. I haven't watched any of the other episodes yet, but I know he's going to end up poisoning them, right? That has to be what happens, because he's the guy in charge of feeding them. If I was in charge here, they're probably too naive to think of this. But if I was in charge here, I'd be like, okay, the guy who thinks that we should execute the prisoners shouldn't put him in charge of their food, because that is a very easy vector for poisoning, and they're probably not even thinking on that level. So, I just find that interesting. The woman is giving birth now, and we're leaving to Vault 32 to investigate, and this is when the episode starts to get really dark, really messed up. We got people in lockers sold as products, and we got organs hanging. It's just like sickening stuff. and it just went so dark so quick, and I could not be happier about it, honestly. The robot's gonna harvest her organs. This is what part of the episode you can nitpick, how realistic is it, whatever. It's a great scene. I'm fine with it. I'm not gonna do that here because I'm just too happy with this. So these guys are threatened into letting them go, and then she makes them let go of the feral ghouls because she doesn't know about that yet. Although part of me thinks that she's smart enough, she should be able to pick up on these context clues, but we got that naivete, that idealism and all of that. So I think it is suiting. I love the makeup and the casting and the acting of these ghouls. Like, you gotta give props to these, I suppose you would call them extras. I don't know, featured extras. They're excellent. Perfect casting, great movement. It's not easy to get all these things right. Just amazing, man. And of course, I love that the one that we feel bad for is the one that Lucy has to take down. I think that was smart writing as well, because she wants to do the right thing, but she has to adapt to the wasteland and be able to do violent things. So that's the honesty question from earlier. She has to be able to stay true to herself while still being willing to protect herself. It's not going to be all sunshine and roses. And here, I love this, going through the creepy old vaults, finding out what's wrong. And, here's where, you get into some of the symbolism of what the vault means. And this is true to the Fallout games as well. And the setting of it, and the fact that it's like 1960s aesthetic. It's the American dream idealized, right? But it's only accessible to a certain class of people. You have to be very wealthy to buy your way in here. But it is fundamentally a lie, and there is an ulterior motive to it. But the mystery here of the fact that the raiders got in, everybody was dead already. How did they get in? They had their mother's Pip-Boy. So there is that mystery there, where earlier in the episode, the ghoul was like, there's a difference between what people say they did and what they actually did. The father was up to something shady. The mother didn't starve to death in this benevolent way, like he said. There was something up there. So something happened. We're going to find that out. I think they're doing a great job setting this mystery up, and I find it very interesting. I love her new look, Lucy's new look. She looks like a wastelander now, and you'll love to see it, but she has to help the ghoul, because in the same way he needs to convert her to his ways to justify himself, she has to do the same thing in reverse to him so that she could feel good about herself. So it's this mutual, justification of self, because, there's a very good argument for, this guy's a murderous piece of shit, maybe I should just leave him, but I'm better than that. The whole point of me doing what I did earlier is to prove that. So I love that, man. And it's really cool. The character arcs is very thoughtfully done. And, here is where he stumbles upon a tape of his old movies, and he's remembering who he used to be, and maybe a little bit of that humanity is getting through. But phenomenal episode, lots to talk about. Really excited for getting into the next one, and we're going to be jumping straight into that after I watch it. And I'll see you guys on the other side. So I just watched episode 5, and it was kind of an exposition episode. Didn't necessarily have any big standout moments, but it sets up things to come. So not an episode that you would point to and be like, this is my favorite one, this is the best episode there is. Nothing like that. This episode serves a couple functions. One, it gets Lucy and Maximus working together again, and it sets up the mystery about Vault 31. So not as much to really break into. There's a lot of exposition. I appreciated seeing a bit of the history of the world. This is definitely an episode that slows things down. I think it could have used maybe a big creature or some big standout moment, something just in this episode, some conflict that's resolved by the end, but really it's just a bridge to the next storyline. So I think it's a good episode. Could have used a little extra, but it's definitely maybe on the bottom of the list if you're going to rank them all out. But you need episodes like this in a TV show. So the first scene here is about Maximus learning that he can't trust people, which is going to give him the wrong lesson for how he needs to interact with Lucy in the future. And basically he's like, I'm going to tell the truth of who I am to Thaddeus, his squire, and hopefully everything works out. But he should have known better that it wasn't going to work out in his favor. And then they end up fighting, and Thaddeus just leaves him there to die, basically. Takes the old pre-war FC fusion coil out of him and then just runs away and he's stuck there. And then coincidence, that's the big thing. The big criticism I have of the show overall is an over reliance on coincidences. Lucy just so happens to walk by, right? And it's definitely something that bothers me. In a lot of shows, I can look past it because I'm having fun with the whole storyline altogether, and I think the characters are good, and there's a lot of good stuff here. So I can overlook certain things, but it's definitely worth noting that is a problem with this show, definitely. It would have made more sense if the head was still here and she was looking for it and all that, or even if she had a line of dialogue where she was like, the thing was here, so I know you had it, but there's nothing like that. It's just a pure coincidence. You gotta keep in mind how big this world is. This wasteland is massive. It would be astronomical to run into people randomly all the time. You can forgive it once or twice. This whole show is based on that. But regardless, we got Lucy in her full kind of raider form, and she's stomping on bugs, and that was cool to see. I like the transformation going from innocent to bathed in fire. She was, baptized essentially in irradiated water, the corruption in last episode. But I think it's a little quick to have her stomping on bugs and all that, or at least I would have liked a line where she was like, ew, gross, or some type of reaction that she's getting covered in this stuff, because she is used to being clean, right? So it would be a big transition for her. It makes sense that she's a little icy at this point, given that she's been betrayed before, but I do think that she was a little bit too hesitant to help Maximus, especially since Maximus saved her in the first episode. It felt a little forced that she's like, oh, I don't want to trust you, I'm not going to let you out, and all that. Maybe a little bit, they just had to dial it back just a tad. I think it was too big of a transition right away. So that criticism stands, I think, in this episode. But I like that they have this deal, where they're going to work together, they're going to decide to trust each other, and then Maximus lies to her, which I'm sure is going to pay off later when she learns what his real name is, and the trust is going to be dissolved at that point. And she goes out of his way to help him in this episode, so setting up their relationship on the foundation of a lie, not a good place to start. So that is really what they're setting up in this first scene here. Get those guys together. The other part of the episode here is Norm and Chet investigating the Vault 31. People wanted to get in there. There's something in Vault 31. We don't know what it is. Something bad is going on in that vault, and the lady who's going to be the overseer, there's this election, knows something about it. She knows that they're up to something. They lie to her. She pretends not to know anything. She definitely does know something. Betty is on their case, and basically there's something sinister about her. She is not benevolent. There's something wrong with Vault 31. They are more clued in to what the Vault Tech agenda really is. So I think that there is definitely something there, and I'm really excited to find out more about it. There's a bunch of scenes with them talking, and they're solid. But it's definitely just kind of the part you can tune out and you're not going to miss a lot. So, I like those scenes. Don't get me wrong. And building that relationship is definitely important for the rest of the show, I'm sure. I like this voting scene where the guys, this awkward Davey, I guess his name is, according to this, he's just telling everybody who's going to vote for, etc. And even the guy running against Betty ends up voting for her anyway because of how dire things are, and people want somebody with experience. So talking about the past, talking about what happened the past 200 years, that's a fun conversation, makes sense. But, that's a scene you could have cut out and you wouldn't have lost a lot. But I appreciate seeing that. So next we got Betty winning the election, and Norm is basically just making it so obvious that he's suspicious of her. Something's going to happen with Norm. He's going to get imprisoned or something. I don't know. We shall see. This bridge scene with Lucy and Maximus is a lot of fun. There's tension here. Just kind of a basic apocalypse scene. It's something you'd see in The Walking Dead, etc., where there's this uneasy standoff, and then they end up shooting each other. Lucy's really trying to defuse things. She's still got that humanity in her where she wants to innocently protect human life, which is why she's a good protagonist, I think, in this world, because she is the one who is the least corrupted. But, they can tell, the other people can tell just walking by that they're more well off. They're looking at her Pit Boy, the fact that they're a little bit cleaner, they know that they have something that they don't. And plus, Maximus says that they're fiends that eat people, so those guys were never to be trusted, despite Lucy's attempts. And the big thing that happens is Maximus gets shot, which sets up the end of the episode. These scenes, we're just setting up what is going on in Vault 31. There's something suspicious, yada yada. Now we're learning about the NCR. All this is good. I love seeing the city skyline destroyed. We get the nugget about Maximus's past, that this is where he's from. I love seeing the sandy shores. That's from the games too. And now we're at the Hawthorne Laboratories, also from the games, part of Vault Tech. And here's where they collect specimens for their experiments. And I love the tension, and the lighting in this episode is particularly good. I like the strobe lights going overhead that kind of point where you're supposed to go, and that's leading people into their trap, funneling them down there. And I really like, even in the first scene, they had the great lighting with the fire, and they had the head illuminated by the fire in little flashes, so that was really cool as well. There's this false door, and you can see that it's actually flat, and there's nothing behind there. And then it's a trap door that opens. That's all really fun, and I'm excited to see how messed up the experiments get. And then we see that they cleaned up Vault 32, and only criticism here is that they keep cutting back to the previous episode. It's like, I remember all that, I just watched it, maybe once or twice would have been fine, but it was kind of annoying to see those cutaways. That's a pet peeve. They're doing that in every show now. I think it's something that the studio heads require. They're like, hey, people only half pay attention to these streaming shows, so we got to make it as obvious as possible, because they might not have actually been watching the screen and just had it on in the background while they're doing laundry or whatever. I hate that type of storytelling personally, but, I think I just have to live with that, because it's just every show does it now. And now we wake up in the vault. Lucy's like, oh, we're saved, but we already know something bad is going down. I suspect this is Vault 31. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure I'll find out in the next episode. So looking forward to that, and I'll see you guys on the other side. See you there. So, episode 6. Wow, what a surprising and interesting episode. This show's going a lot of places I didn't quite expect from this Fallout show. They're definitely not just resting on their laurels, doing a standard story, what we would expect in Fallout. We are actually getting into stuff that is going to, I think, illuminate some things we've been wondering as fans for a long time. So this show is actually going to push the franchise forward in an interesting direction. That's what I'm assuming based on this episode, and maybe we'll get into more of that with the 2 episodes left to come. Check out my next review for that one. But I was really impressed with this episode. Surprising amount of the episode takes place before the apocalypse, which I was not expecting. Some really interesting twists at the end of the episode. So I'm really excited to get into it. So I like this opening scene, starting with shooting at the vault, and it's Vault 4, which is the vault that we end up at in the rest of the episode. I speculated at the end of the last episode that was Vault 31 that they were dropping into. Not at all. Lucy ends up in Vault 4, which it's fun to have that little before and after connection, and they've done that in a couple episodes now. So it's really interesting to get into the conspiracy angle of what Vault Tech is really about, because we've only really seen glimpses of it. We haven't seen much before the apocalypse in the Fallout universe to this point. We've only really read documents on computers about what Vault Tech is about. So it's interesting to actually see it here in person. We have a company that is designed around selling the end of the world to people, to the point that they are willing to put negotiations to stop nuclear war on hold to make themselves more money. And it's not just a short-term thing. This guy at the beginning is saying that they're playing the long game. The scale of the company has more to do with time than it does with actual money and, size and scale and all that. It's all about the amount of time. So they're playing the long game, which means Vault Tech, I think, is going to have something to do with the last few episodes. I mean, we're in the point in the Fallout universe where we're past Fallout 4, so anything can happen, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen next. But I love this concept of this guy that he's talking to, Bud. I think Bud Askins. This guy here was a designer at another company that made the suits, and the suits had a flaw that meant that a lot of people died in Anchorage, and the actor Cooper was there. So I'm speculating that he did that on purpose, that the flaw was purposeful because he then went on to be at Vault-Tec? Maybe not, but we're dealing with a conspiracy that reaches a lot of different aspects of society. They got government connections and all of that. So I think it's really interesting to delve into this stuff, and I'm curious to see if we'll get even more. Now, there's this party at Cooper's house. Nice little detail, by the way, I have to point it out. A man and his dog, and he has a dog, which is cool, but A Boy and His Dog is a movie, post-apocalyptic movie that inspired Fallout, and it also is based on a story by Harlan Ellison that I read. Great movie, really interesting, weird movie, and it definitely set the stage for Fallout in a lot of ways. You know, there's cult stuff at the end of that definitely resembles Vault-Tec, especially in this episode, some of the cult stuff at the end. So putting this Easter egg in this episode in particular makes a lot of sense. And now we're going to the party. People at the party, you overhear them talking about how we have to stop the negotiations so we can make more money on our quarterlies. And here is a really, really fun detail where we have the voice actor who does the voice for the robots in person, and it's an actor who was also paid by that company to do those roles. And this guy, I think, sounds so much like the guy who played the role in the video games. I had to look it up to see if it was the same person. It's actually not. He was not the voiceover in the game, but he's so good at doing that voice, I thought it was the same person. So really cool little Easter egg to have him here. And he's talking about how the Hollywood system is overrun with radicals, in his word, and he is also saying how we have to sell products. You know, we're moving past the stage of Hollywood to the stage of products, and the future is a tech company. And I think it's kind of interesting because it's definitely trying to mirror the world today. You know, we're watching a show made by a tech company, you know, a company that used to sell products and is now indulging in art and media. So it's kind of interesting that they're almost commenting on their own show. There's this meta commentary going on that I think is interesting, and I would have to watch it again to really delve into that with any depth, but I find it interesting. Then we cut to Cooper in the modern day, or modern according to this show, and we got these sheriffs showing up and they arrest him. This is the one part of the episode could use a little bit more time, but I'm honestly glad that we spent most of it doing the things that we did because it's a little bit more interesting than this. And now we are at Vault 4, and Maximus is getting taken care of, and of course they're test subjects. We pull back and we see the test subject sign, and I think it's funny, you know, this part with talking about sex and stuff, but one thing I wanted to point out is that, you know, he's saying that he doesn't know what sex is, which is really hilarious to me. But we did see in the first episode a guy choking his chicken in the first episode of the Brotherhood of Steel. So I don't know. Those two things didn't match up. I was a little confused by that. But, you know, I do think it's funny. And here we got an interesting scene where we're starting to realize something is wrong at this vault because the overseer has one eye, somebody has a nose on their forehead, somebody's like hand is fused together, and that's just showing that there are biological experiments going on. Something's not right. Of course, they have a chute that led them down to their prison now, so there's definitely something up. Then we see Cooper walking through the wasteland, and then we're back with Cooper in the past, and now we're setting up this idea that there's good vaults and bad vaults, which, you know, if you're a Fallout fan, you know, of course, but we're getting into that now in the show. And this woman, Barb here, she works for the company, and you have to wonder why she's so insistent on working there when obviously she has enough money with Howard in Hollywood and stuff. So she's doing it not for the paycheck, she is doing it so that they get in one of the good vaults. Because if they just buy a ticket, they might get in one of the bad vaults, which are human experiments, test subjects, etc. So I think that that's really interesting that she knows more than she's really letting on. So I love that. And then we get this scene at the bar, a guy who acted in a movie with him, with Howard, and he is going to these radical meetings, and he is saying how Vault-Tec has a responsibility to ensure that nuclear war happens so that they can give their investors money. I think it's interesting. I'm loving the conspiracy angle, you know, and he gives him a card and tells him to meet them somewhere. And now Howard is starting to doubt Vault-Tec, not really sure what's going on. And he is starting to ask his wife questions. Who makes the rules? Is there really freedom in this world that we're about to sign up and live in now? And he's not liking the sound of it. But they make up by the end of the scene, but I have a feeling that that's not the end of that conversation there. Then we cut to the overseer, and he's acting really weird, acting like he doesn't know much, and he's definitely putting on a show, I think. And rewatching this now, I just noticed that they pan past fish tank, which is subtle. Shout out to the end of the episode. Just now noticing that. That's really cool. So I like that. And Lucy's not liking the answers that she's getting from him because he's basically stonewalling her. And now we got Maximus. That's another thing I had a question about is like, how did they find the suit? That doesn't sound realistic or make sense to me unless they had data from Lucy's Pip-Boy that showed where they had been. And if they did have that, I don't know why they would go out of their way to chase down something they didn't know was there previously. Now, maybe they have a device that can listen to their conversations. That would make sense, I guess. There's the central planning going on. They can justify it later, but as of right now, it just seems a little far-fetched that they would manage to find that they would bother to go out there and get it and bring it back. What is the purpose of doing that? That's maybe it's just to make Maximus feel comfortable. Not quite sure. He goes down to the generator and he wants to take out the FC, the fusion core, so that he can leave. And this Lady Birdie happens to come across him at the exact right time. So they're definitely being watched and they're test subjects. So maybe everybody else is at control and they are the only two test subjects and everybody's just putting on a show just to see what they do. So who knows? I guess we'll find out next episode. But Maximus is starting to like this place. And I think it's really funny. His comedic timing is excellent in this episode. Just really great acting. And one thing that I was thinking about while I was watching this is he doesn't really have a burning reason to go back to the Brotherhood. He wanted to find the head so that he could go back to the Brotherhood and not get killed. He was just out for survival. But if he has a comfortable place to live, that the Brotherhood won't find him, he has no incentive to go back. So it makes sense to me that they're giving him this arc and he's a little questioning. We're trying to get him in this episode to stop questioning the vault. He feels weird about it at first, but then he sees all the luxuries that he would get if he stayed here, and he is on board. So I think it's a good character arc for him this episode. Then we learn a little bit more about Shady Sands and how it became the capital of the NCR, and then it gets bombed. The fall of Shady Sands is 2277, which I have that date burned in my memory because that's when Fallout 3 takes place. So I think that's interesting. I'd have to look at the timeline stuff, but I don't know if we knew that Shady Sands became the capital or not, if that's new information. I don't remember offhand, but I do remember it was in the first game. The little bit of the first game that I played, Shady Sands was in there, so I think it's cool that we're adding a bit of lore there and pushing the franchise forward. It's more than just, we're trying to milk this cash cow of Fallout by making a show about it. We are using the show as a vector for the franchise itself, keeping it going in a direction, which is awesome because it's going to be a long time before we get another game, considering they're working on Elder Scrolls 6, and that's going to take a while to come out too. So we're ways off from Fallout 5. I wish they would just let Obsidian do it. But, rant aside, here we are with Cooper in the modern day, the present time. And he's meeting with somebody he used to know who is now calling himself the president of the government or something. They spell it wrong outside, which is really funny. We don't really know the backstory of what's going on, but there's some reason why they haven't just killed him yet. He has something on him. I'm wondering if we're going to learn more about this. But for some reason, the deputy wants to shoot him because he's insulting his dad. He shot up Philly. They killed this business that they were affiliated with, etc. And I don't know why the president guy doesn't let this guy shoot him. They want to take him out back and feed him to the dogs. I didn't really get that. That didn't make sense to me, why they wouldn't just shoot him. And now we know, he's a ghoul. He's a little bit harder to kill than your average person. But you would think that it would be a little bit easier just to shoot him than to drag him outside. So he manages to get one over on him, and then he sees a wanted poster of the woman from episode 1 who broke into the vault, the leader of the Raiders, and he recognizes her. Big reveal with her at the end. We got to be careful with these next few scenes here. There's this weird cult thing, and people are stripping naked. They're drinking blood and putting ashes over their head. Really weird stuff. And then they get the banner of the woman's face from the first episode. She is their god that they're praying to. It's really weird. And at the same time, we're intercutting that with Cooper here, who is... Did anybody else get this? Where Next Up came up at this point in the episode? That happened while I was watching it. It doesn't make any sense because we are not at the end of the episode. So Cooper finds the same person here. So this person has been living for 200 plus years. What is going on? I'm so perplexed. Like, this makes no sense to me unless she was in cryosleep or something like that, you know, like our Fallout 4 protagonist. I'm really racking my brain about what that could be, why it's like that. We're going to skip past the rest of the nudity because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. But then we break into the forbidden layer of the vault. And this level, I was certain, based on the earlier part of the episode, that she was supposed to come down here. You know, they did reverse psychology, said don't go down there. If they really didn't want her to go down there, they would have sealed it off. They would have forced her to have a key. You know, there would be security measures in place at that point. They knew she was coming down here, and even the ritual thing is probably just a show. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out. But I thought it was really interesting, some of the experiments they showed, and they have people giving birth to some of the creatures. So does that mean that Vault-Tec is creating some of the mutants? You know, we just assumed that the mutants were as a result of the radiation. That's not realistic, but we are in a sci-fi landscape. But maybe it actually is that Vault-Tec is creating these creatures because, again, they are profiting off of nuclear warfare. And if the surface is uninhabitable because of these creatures, that is maybe part of their agenda. So I'm really curious about this. I'm loving this show, man. The deeper we get into it. Had a little criticisms here for this episode in particular along the way. We had a couple criticisms, but overall, just really enjoying it. So I'm really looking forward to checking out the next 2 episodes. And I hope to see you guys in that next review. Going to be reviewing the last 2 episodes in tomorrow's video. And with that, it's been your boy Shuggy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.